Wait, or am I supposed to go? Pew, pew? All right. We're actually set up the studio a little differently. I'm on the opposite side. I feel weird here. Anyone ever watch that movie Zoolander? Remember from the good old days? And the guy used to joke and be like, I can't turn left, you know? So I'm going to have to figure this out. It's a different setup here, but I love it. All right. So welcome back. I think, we're all getting ready for Christmas is coming up in a couple weeks. I know everyone's excited and hopefully the new year is going to be great this coming, what are we at? 2023. All right. Good stuff. And I'm excited. A few people contacted me, run it by my lawyer. So I always tell people, run it by me and I'll let you know what I think. And I had this guy named Andrew, good guy. He owns a house in San Diego. And for the last couple of years, he wasn't getting a water bill, and he kept checking online. He kept trying to figure it out, and he just didn't understand why he was not getting a water bill. And then a few days ago, all of a sudden, he got a $2,400 water bill, right? So it was just out of nowhere. So he contacts me. He's like, well, what can I do about this? And I said, well, here's your options. You can pay it or lose your house. You pick. No, I'm just kidding. Because, the city has almost unlimited power when it comes to that. But all jokes aside, he could probably get a delay in having to pay it type of thing because under the circumstances. But one thing he's not going to get is the water thing waived, Other than that, I said, you know what? Why don't you just drink more coffee? Okay. No. Okay. So I thought that was interesting. All right. So now today's topic, look, my goal with this podcast is to kind of explain how the law works to people. And when I say people, I mean lawyers, younger lawyers, experienced lawyers, like the general public. I kind of want to, for people to understand how the law works. And the law could be a very boring topic. So what I always like to do is bring up interesting cases and interesting stories, and then through those stories kind of explain how the law is working. So today's topic will be Katie Meyer. Okay, as you can see, a young woman here. And then today's, what we're going to talk about is some the tragic events that led to her suicide. And now her parents are suing Stanford University for tens and tens of millions of dollars, maybe $100 million, And what I'm going to do is kind of like walk you through what happened, how the law works, how the jurisdiction works, and how all the different pieces kind of have to connect in terms of this lawsuit, all right? Miss Meyer was born in January 2000. So at the time, she was 22 years old. And wow, January 2000, I think back then, people were still, right? People were worried about the Y2K bug. Anyone remember that? Right? And, the world's going to end in the year 2000 because of the Y2K bug. Anyway, so she was born in the, January 2000, and she had the most amazing credentials. She was the captain of the Stanford women's soccer team. She was the goalkeeper, and she was, like an MVP of their championship game. And she was, one of the best goalkeepers. She was the resident advisor at the Stanford freshman dorm. She was a Mayfield fellow. She was a defensive innovator scholar. I mean, her credentials, she had almost a 4.0 GPA at Stanford. She was the ambassador for Just Women's Sports and the creator of a podcast. Any creator of a podcast has to be, given some props here. So she had her own podcast. She was an upcoming speaker at a TEDx talk. That's a freaking pretty big deal, right? Anyway, so she was on her way to Stanford Law School. So as you could tell, so she had all the, everything going for her in her life. And now comes the kind of like, how the heck did this happen and what happened? Okay. So our friend Katie said the captain of the Stanford soccer team, there was an allegation. So one of her teammates, a 17-year-old at the time, so a minor, right? There was an allegation that somebody from the Stanford football team, and now that we're in the World Cup, let's get this straight. The football is football, right? Again, I don't know. There's some people call football soccer or vice versa, right? No, we all know what football is, okay? All right, so somebody from the Stanford football team, the allegation was sexually assaulted her teammate and friend who was on the women's soccer team, right? And the allegation, that happened or allegedly happened on August 20, 2021. These dates are important, okay? And then 1 week later, on August 28, 2021, Katie saw this guy and she threw coffee at him, okay? So she saw him on campus and she threw coffee at him. All right, so that's what happened. Now, there was something very important after that. The football player said that it was just an accident and he didn't want to press charges or anything like that. Like, he didn't want to do anything. He said, oh, she spilled coffee on me. It was an accident. Katie said the same thing. This was an accident. I think we all know what really happened. It probably wasn't an accident, but the bottom line is what we call the alleged victim said, right? He said, this is just an accident. I'm sure he probably didn't want any more heat on him, after the coffee spill, but he said it was an accident. And the reason why that's important is because in law, a lot of times when you don't have somebody that's supposed to be the victim saying it was a crime, then you don't really, like, the prosecutor wouldn't have a case. Do you see what I'm saying? Because can you imagine the prosecutor saying, oh, so then he hit you? No, he didn't. We bumped into each other. It's like, whoa, their case is gone, right? So anyway, so you would think that is where the story ended. No, unfortunately, that is not where the story ended. 6 months later, after Stanford kind of went back and forth a little bit with Katie, and they interviewed some other people, Stanford ended up charging her. And the word charging is kind of weird because you would think it's like a criminal case, but it's not a criminal case. It's a school case, so to speak. And when they charged her 6 months later, they had the authority to kick, they said in a letter to her, in an email to her, that, we're going to charge you with, spilling coffee on this guy, and that if you're found guilty, you could get kicked out of the school. She was on her way to graduate. We could withhold your diploma, kick you off the team. You're obviously not going to go to Stanford Law School. Like, whoa, like her whole life flashed before her eyes. And it was that night, February 28, 6 months from there, that same night after she got the email, that she, took her own life, okay? She was in her dorm room alone. It was in the middle of the night, and she hanged herself, okay? So now comes the aftermath and kind of how the law is going to work itself out through here, and the parents and everything, and how it all goes, all right? Now, first things first, the lawsuit was then filed 9 months later in November 2022, all right? She died in February 2022. Now, during those 9 months, the parents and their lawyers and Stanford and its lawyers tried to get this issue resolved, all right? And they couldn't. And what that means is probably, what I believe happened is the parents were very upset, obviously, and they were probably looking for a lot more money than the university wanted to pay, okay? So it's not like this lawsuit just comes out of the blue. And then the lawsuit is filed in November 2022. Now, there are at least 4 law firms representing Katie Meyer's parents. All right, let's go through these law firms really quick. The first one is Justice Law Collaborative LLC. They hired an attorney out of Boston, Massachusetts, Kimberly Doherty. Now, she's a big shot, and I'll tell you one of the cases that her law firm settled. It was that USA Gymnastics case. Remember that infamous doctor who sexually assaulted a lot of different USA Gymnastics, the women's team. And that settlement was for over $400 million. And that was just one of the settlements in that case. So she was kind of a big shot in that particular case. And then you have these other law firms, as Wilford Law, Consumer Protection Legal Law in Missouri, and Casey Flynn's law firm. Okay, so we have now 4 law firms that represent the parents. And I'm going to tell you that if the parents ever tell their story to a jury, it is not going to be good for the university. All right, as you can see here in this really quick clip, This is the parents talking about their daughter.
We're just like heartbroken. And she was excited. She had a lot on her plate. She had a lot going on. She was happy. She was in great spirits.
It was the usual jovial Katie.
Yeah.
Obviously, the parents are in a lot of pain. They're beautiful, beautiful parents. They're obviously very loving, very caring. Their daughter had everything going for her, right? And, everything is going perfectly, right? And so if these parents tell their story to a jury, we don't know. My gut feeling, and especially after the jury learns more about Katie Meyer and sees pictures of her. I mean, she looks like she's got it all together. She's, captain of the soccer team. She's doing amazing in school. She, all the soccer players are going to stand up for her and talk about how awesome she was as a person. And what was her, at worst, what was her crime? Going after a football player who allegedly sexually assaulted her teammate who is only 17 years old, right? So God forbid for the university, if these two parents tell their story to a jury, I don't know what will happen. And when I say I don't know, I'm just saying I don't know if it's going to be $100 million that a jury would give them or whatever, $200 million. We don't know. Okay. All right. Now, the first order of business, here's a little trivia. What do I always like to discuss first when I talk about a lawsuit? Jurisdiction, right? Where is the proper jurisdiction in this case? The jurisdiction in this case is going to be in California, and it's going to be in Santa Clara County, California, all right? So this is very important. The plaintiffs are California residents. So Mr. and Mrs. Meyer are California residents. Now, Stanford is in California, and it is a resident of California. I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, Stanford's a school. It's not a person. But with corporations and schools and things like that, they're considered a person in terms of the legal, so they reside in the state that they're either incorporated in or they do their principal place of business in. So here, obviously, Stanford is, does this principal place of business is in California. And it's a private school, so it's kind of treated like a private corporation. It's not the government. All right. So we have a California resident or two California residents suing a California resident. When that happens, from the jurisdiction standpoint, the law students will better listen quick. Okay. There's no, it's called diversity of jurisdiction because the plaintiffs and the defendants are of the same state. So when there's no diversity jurisdiction, then the only way to get in a federal court is you have to have what's called subject matter jurisdiction. Subject matter jurisdiction, you have to have diversity of the plaintiffs and defendants are different states, and the lawsuit is over $75,000, or you have to have what's called a federal question. A federal question means you're suing over some sort of free speech right or some sort of equal protection clause right or some sort of other federal constitutional issue or federal legal issue. Here, that's not the case. This is a simple, I say simple in the sense that, it's not a constitutional case. It's a tort law claim and it's under state law. So the jurisdiction is the California State Court, all right? I assure you Stanford would love to have been able or would love to be able to get this case into federal court. Now, what the hell is the difference between the state court and the federal court? I used to always wonder that because in San Diego, it's like the state court is on, I think it's a 330 West Broadway, right? And the federal court's like, 221 West Broadway. It's like right across the street, all right? So, but that street is a very important street apparently because in a federal court, the defendant can, the defendant could win the case if not all of the jurors agree on liability and the amount. So, and the defendant could win because in the federal courts require that everybody agrees that the defendant is liable and that the defendant, on a monetary amount. Whereas in the state court, you don't need all the jurors to agree on civil liability. So that right there, that is one of the most important ones where the defendant always wants to get into a federal court. All right. So here the jurisdiction is in state court. All right. And I go through that because when I was in law school, I thought jurisdiction was kind of a boring topic. And then in practice, it turns out that in a lot of cases, the first few years of litigation are just over jurisdiction. Okay, now we can talk about the case again. Okay, so now what the parents have to do is they have to prove that the university screwed up and that the university, it was foreseeable that how the university acted resulted in her killing herself. Okay, so now comes the tort law claim. All right. Now the first order of business is this: the university, when they finally sent her a letter, an email, as in the case, saying that we're trying to kick you out of the school. We're trying to withhold your diploma. We are trying to kick you off the soccer team. We're trying to take away your scholarship. We're trying to, make sure you don't go to law school here at Stanford. Like, wow, that ruined her life, or the image of all of that in her mind was like, my life is ruined. Everything I've worked for and so hard for is now ruined, right? One of the things that the parents' lawyers did such a great job in this civil action complaint is this. They said, well, what happened was when they initially started kind of investigating this, the guy that, like I said before, the football player said it was an accident. No, nothing, don't ask me anymore. All's good, right? And when they asked her, she said it was an accident. Maybe it was. I wasn't there, right? She said it was an accident, and the alleged victim said it was an accident. Okay. And then you just had this woman, this associate dean, Lisa Caldera. Okay, she was the associate dean of residential living. Did you guys know there's an associate dean of residential living? What the like? There's a dean of residential living, then there's an associate dean. Okay, for some crazy reason, this associate dean here, she just takes it upon herself. There's no alleged victim. She just takes it upon herself to go after Katie Meyer and file these charges against Katie Meyer. I don't know what her problem was, all right? Anyway, I just don't know. I don't know. I know one thing's for sure, the jury will hate her guts, okay? Because they're just going to look at her and be like, what the hell were you pushing this for, I don't know. Okay, but I don't think it's going to look good. But nonetheless, so she pushed this issue. Then when the university kind of was discussing this with her, she informed the university that this is stressing her out. This is causing her major, shock and withdrawal and all of the above. And her lawyers did a good job of kind of detailing, what the university did or didn't do. Okay, this is what happened. The university, keep in mind, these are the student athletes at Stanford. They're obviously like a big deal, right? They bring so much money to the school and all of that. And they have psychologists and counselors and all that stuff. So she went and saw one, all right? Now, this is the funny part, is that lawyers have a funny way of spinning different things. Like, to me, it's like, wow, in a way, obviously the university did the right thing by having her seeing a counselor, right? Now, what the lawyers said is something a little different. They said, so she went to counseling and she informed the counselors of how this situation was causing her major stress and major, drama in her life, right? And it got so bad that one of the counselors, they recommended she sees a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist recommended this medicine, Concerta. Yeah, it's some sort of medication that the psychiatrist thought would help her out with this. And then for some reason, and then this will be, come out during the discovery phase, she wasn't able to even get that medication. She tried to get it through the university and she said there was some sort of insurance issue or blah, blah, blah. She tried a couple times. She didn't get it. And the trail went cold. And that Stanford doctor didn't follow up, and say well, why didn't you take it? Or, didn't send her a letter saying you should take it. Or if you don't want to take it, why don't you come back? Or, whatever the case may be. So the lawyers detailed kind of how, the doctors at Stanford and how they kind of dropped the ball, so to speak. And look, maybe she dropped the ball, right?
I probably shouldn't say drop the ball because she's a goalkeeper.
Let me stop saying that. Sorry. Maybe she's the one that didn't follow up correctly. Okay. So anyway, so there we have it. And then, but nonetheless, the doctors are usually the ones that should follow up correctly, right? But they didn't. Now, the reason why I'm saying I applaud the lawyers for the plaintiff so much is then they say, all right, when they finally did send her an email saying we're going to like ruin your life completely, they sent it on February 28, 2022, and they sent the email around 7 p.m. Okay, now why is that important? Because the lawyers said at 7 p.m., all of the university services are already closed, right? And at 7 p.m., she had no recourse to kind of go to, her counselor or anything, right? You know how those folks are. It's like they work 9 to 5 and you make a call and they call you 8 months later, whatever. Okay, so I'm joking about the 8 months. But she had nobody to turn to, so to speak, with an email at 7 p.m. And then sure enough, she actually did respond to that email, from the office that charged her and said that, we're gonna formally charge us and ruin your life potentially, right? She did respond saying, I am shocked and distraught. And then she sends that email right away, and the university did nothing. All right. Nothing. They could have, tried to run it up the ladder, tried to send someone there, tried to call her, do whatever. There was one report that said, like it was, oh, well, we opened in 3 days and maybe we could discuss it then, in a hearing or something. But there was nothing that kind of sought out to help her, right? So she's alone in her dorm room. There's nobody there to help her, and there's nobody for her to call. In theory, the lawyers are saying that knowing that she's going through all of this, knowing that all of this is happening, they should have, instead of sending her an email after everything's closed. And by the way, February 28th, it's kind of, I don't know, this is kind of weird because the time just changed. So, the daylight savings ended about a month ago. And here in California, at something like 4 p.m., it seems like it's nighttime, right? Doesn't it? At 4 p.m., it's like dark almost. And at 5 p.m., 6 p.m., I joke when I leave the office, like really late at night, like 5:30, I feel like it's midnight. So anyways, it's 7 p.m., no one's there with her, blah, blah, blah. Like I said before, everything's already closed. So the lawyers make it a point to say, because the university knows all of this, and instead of them sending an email to a student athlete that they know is already very distraught over this, and she sent, these, when they investigated her, she told them she's very distraught, and they know, instead of having a kind of system that sends an email at night, that maybe when they're gonna ruin a student's life, they should, hey, how's it going? You know what I'm saying? What's up? Blah, blah, blah. It's kind of, like that. I guess it's kind of like, if you're going to break up with someone, you don't do it in a text message or something. I don't know. But it just, that's kind of what they're saying. But to a very, very important degree here, they're saying that, and this is, I'm going through this in what some of you may think is like, why does he keep harping on this? Because this is kind of the gist of the case. This could be the $100 million question, because if this gets to a jury and a judge says to a jury, was it negligent, under the circumstances, being that the university knew how distraught this was and how awesome of a student athlete she was, and that this letter is going to be, we're going to ruin your life type of letter. Was it negligent that they would send this to her at a time when she can't seek any services and get any help from the university? Right? Wow. If I was Stanford's lawyers, I would not want the jury to have to answer that question. Do you see what I'm saying? So I believe in this case, that is going to be a big part of it, right? And it's not how expensive would it have been for them to email her earlier in the day? Not at all, right? How expensive could it have been if they said, hey, we wanted to talk about this or have someone go over there? I don't know. But by the way, in another way, imagine if somebody goes over there and then the allegation is why didn't you just email her? Why did you have to have someone go over there like that? then, people notice that she's in trouble. So you see what I'm saying? So it's not necessarily going to be a dead end. Again, I be better with my words. It's not going to be the end of the case if they kind of say, we didn't have someone go over there. Like Stanford still has some defenses, but I do think that this is the gist of the case. Okay. Now, there's other extremely important issues here. All right. In law, it's kind of crazy because, and one of the reasons why I always say to people, like, why do these lawsuits take so long? All right. There's another topic that while I was in law school, now, by the way, I'm not picking on Stanford because I'm a UC Berkeley law school graduate. There's a big rivalry between UC Berkeley and Stanford. Part of the rivalry revolves around how much of a better school UC Berkeley is, okay? How much better athletics departments they have, better history and all the above, right? No, just kidding. Okay, so that's not why I'm picking on Stanford. I think it's an interesting case. Okay, so now what I always tell people is this kind of rule of evidence. What if there's a jury trial? What will the jury hear? Okay, and that is what this rules of evidence. The rules of evidence. Okay, and the rules of evidence could make or break a case. Now let me explain a few things. All right, here we go. Man, you know what my favorite thing about this was? God, I love these lawyers. They were very concise with their complaint. Like when I downloaded it, I'm like, oh, it's only like 70 pages. I was excited. I almost felt like I was cheating, because most of the time you have like a complaint that's like, 500 pages when it could have just been 70. And so these lawyers are good. The fact that they made it so short. Okay. There is a saying, by the way, in the movies or whatever. Somebody said one time, like, well, why didn't you make it a short movie instead of like a long movie? And the guy said, well, I didn't have the time to make it a short movie, because it's so hard to condense something and still make it really good. So that's what these lawyers did. Okay, so here we go. This is what I mean by rules of evidence. Will the jury, can they or can they not hear this? At the time, after this alleged incident of her throwing coffee at the guy, which, by the way, her lawyers keep saying, she spilled coffee. Like, come on. We know she didn't spill coffee. We know that it was kind of a heroic, she threw it at the guy. The guy says she spilled it. She says she spilled it. All right, no harm, no foul. It's all done. Right? I think the lawyers could get a little more credibility saying that instead of continuously say I spilled coffee 10 million times in my life. No one ever sued me for it. Right? Because they knew it was a freaking accident. Right? Anyway, nonetheless, in this... what they bring up in this complaint is after this allegation that she spilled coffee or threw coffee or whatever it was, the university continued to promote her in their marketing materials. So if you look at some of these pictures here, you see that Stanford, like they always want to display how awesome their athletics department is, how great their soccer team is, right? Because they're trying to recruit new students, right? And make themselves look good. I mean, come on, they got to do something to be look as good as UC Berkeley, right? So what one of the things that the lawyers are putting up here is that even after this, Stanford continued to promote her and keep her on their university images. Well, if the jury hears that, then I think that's a big deal. I think the jury would be like, well, obviously then they like her, and why are they going after her? And, why would they promote her while they're secretly trying to kick her out? That, we could see why she thought this issue was a done deal and that it wasn't going to come up, right? The university will explain to the judge, and through this process called a motion in limine, all right, and you get to know your Latin, like the light of the, limine meaning light. The university will say that is not relevant, Your Honor, and they'll make a motion to exclude that evidence, right? We're getting to the very, very nitty gritty here, because if the jury knows that, wow, Stanford was marketing her, she was on their public images, their university web pages and whatnot, it'll be very good, obviously, for the family, right? If that evidence is excluded, if the judge says, no, the relevance of that is very little, but the jury could outweigh It's probative value, it's called. And because the jury could misconstrue that evidence, we're just going to throw it out, right? And if the jury doesn't hear that evidence, obviously it'll be a much tougher case for the plaintiffs, right? Those type of disputes, one of the things I want people to understand is that they make or break a case a lot of times, right? And a lot of times when there's a case on appeal, one of the most popular reasons to appeal would be that let's say the family takes this case and it goes through a full trial and the family loses, right? And that all of this evidence was thrown out, meaning that the judge ruled it was inadmissible and the family loses. That would be a great basis for a potential appeal. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like those are the type of things that keep a case going even after a jury trial. Or conversely, if a judge rules that this evidence should be admitted, meaning the jury sees that Stanford was promoting her, and then the university loses, that would be a great basis for the university to file an appeal. And by the way, judges hate when their cases get appealed and then their cases get reversed on appeal. It's like a very big problem that happens, right? So they better rule correctly, or they better rule in a way that they'll be what's it called? It'll be withheld in the appeal. Okay. All right. There's more in terms of the evidence. This one I love. Again, there's a reason why her lawyers are so sought after, and why they're all these big shots, and they hire the parents hired these law firms from different states. They made this other pitch, okay, and I love this so much. I have to quote it to make sure I don't say it wrong. Okay. This is the plaintiff's lawyers talking, right? Stanford holds itself out to new students and their families, including the Meyer family, as not just a university, but as a family. In its students' orientation, Stanford represents, "We warmly welcome you and your student to the Stanford family," right? Paragraph 113 of the complaint. On Stanford's new orientation page of its website, it states, "The approaching Stanford and new student orientation team is thrilled to welcome our undergraduate, first year, and transfer students as newest members of the Stanford family." Okay. That is a big deal, right? Because you know what? One thing the family members don't do is freaking threaten to ruin a family member's life in the middle of the night, right? Some families do that, I think, but not, the warm family, not, so that right there, by the way, that is another type of, evidence. And one of the big deals in this case, to kind of make it or break it things, and again, we're getting down to the very nitty gritty, this is kind of like what lawyers argue about for several months, and in some cases, several years. Will the jury know that that information was relayed to the parents? I think it's relevant, right? I think it's important to know because then it kind of shows that it's like Stanford is kind of telling them, we're gonna treat them kindly, we're gonna be like forgiving, we're gonna work with them, we're not gonna freaking threaten to ruin their life in the middle of the night when they can't get any help, right? So I think that it's relevant. I think that the parents will have a good shot of getting that evidence in. I could be wrong. I'm sure if we had Stanford's lawyers here, they would say I'm crazy and that information is just, I can't whistle very well. Can we edit in a good whistle? Right? So they're going to say that the Stanford lawyers will say Joe Samo's crazy. That evidence is not relevant. Okay. And then another one. I love this one. Paragraph 128, right? Then they said this in the year, and this is the same year that Katie enrolled in Stanford. "To all parents and family members who are here to wish you well." Oh, sorry. Let me start that over. Okay. Paragraph 118. This is a remark made to the parents and everyone at this orientation. "To all of the parents and family members who are here to wish you well as you embark on this journey, I thank you for entrusting your loved ones to us. I want to assure you we will support and care for them," right? So this is the university kind of assuring the parents at this orientation that we're going to take care of them, we're going to look after them. Now we will be your partners, talking to the parents, in supporting them, the students, as they develop into successful citizens who will offer their own important contributions, blah, 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 right? Again, those will be very hard fought out battles over this case. Okay. There's some more different things here. Now, the next one that was very important that the plaintiffs are seeking is, remember when I said there's that football player who allegedly assaulted a minor on the soccer team? According to the family, and they're correct here, in my understanding is that football player never got kicked out, okay? He didn't get kicked out, and these same type of threatening letters and threatening administrative procedures and charges from that associate freaking dean, none of that happened to the football player, okay? And what the parents' attorneys are saying is that Stanford was being discriminatory here, and then discriminatory kind of like favoring, the football players. Like, guess which department makes more money for the university? The football team or the women's soccer team? You don't need that much time, right? Okay, so they're saying that they're kind of discriminating in favor of the male football players because they didn't go after that male football player with the same type of, aggressiveness that they went after Katie Meyer. That will be a big issue in the case. I think, again, Stanford will make the position that is not relevant, that the jury shouldn't know about that the relevance of that is nothing compared to the kind of probative value of all of that. I hate to say it, or I like to say whatever. I think Stanford might win that one. I think that one might be a tough one because that other case, there's so many different circumstances, and there's in law, they usually don't like to have one trial and then there being a separate trial in that trial. Like we don't want the jury to have to go through this case with Katie Meyer and then all of a sudden have a case of, well, did the football player sexually assault that 17-year-old? Like that's not this case. Do you see what I'm saying? So I don't know. I think that one might be a little bit tough to get to. Okay. A couple years before this, there was a lawsuit, a big class action lawsuit against Stanford University. And get this one is pretty interesting. The lawsuit against Stanford University claimed that Stanford was not properly, and the lawsuit was in 2018, so only 4 years ago, and it was settled in 2019, only 3 years ago. That lawsuit alleged that Stanford didn't have proper mental health facilities and mental health, assistance for their students. Stanford settled that lawsuit, paying the plaintiff's attorneys about $500,000 and agreeing that they weren't doing a good job. Okay, that's not good for Stanford if that evidence gets in. And as part of that, what some of the investigation is that apparently, and I did not know this until I really started researching this case, every year about 5 Stanford students die by suicide. Okay, 3 to 5. I didn't know this, right? And what that lawsuit alleged, and Stanford settled it and paid a lot of money. What they alleged was that Stanford didn't have kind of proper, I guess it's obviously it's a very stressful environment for these students, right? And Stanford didn't kind of like look after them or have proper facilities. They didn't have proper mental health kind of, information or doctors or little trigger things to look after them, things like that. But the big one was that Stanford agreed and settled and paid a lot of money and agreed that they would fix things, right? Fudge. That's really, really bad, okay? And if that evidence comes in, that might really hurt the university. Here's the deal. This is why, see what I'm saying? When I was in law school and we would take classes on this evidence and what evidence could come in or not, I just remember thinking, but this isn't the case, or this isn't Like the main issue here is, did they, screw up in how they handled everything with this girl, right? And then all this lawsuit in 2018 and blah, blah, blah. It's not even related to this girl's case. But clearly, if that evidence comes in, then the university could lose not everything, because they're worth billions of dollars, but they could lose a couple $100 million if that evidence comes in, right? And then the plaintiff's lawyers, they detail every student's name who knowingly committed suicide at Stanford in the last few years. I'm not going to say the students' names. It was really, really sad to read, right? But if all of that evidence comes in and they settled the lawsuit, they agreed that they weren't kind of like looking after mental health issues as well as they could have, right? All of that. If all of that evidence comes in, that's going to really be bad, especially if all the evidence of all the other students who committed suicide just in the last couple of years, if that evidence comes in, like fudge, that's going to be bad news. Now, man, God, talking about all this right before Christmas. Okay, so sorry, but it's an interesting case. You want to learn the law. This is, another order of business. All right, hold on, let me say it over. The next order of business goes like this. If the family proves that Stanford acted improperly, they were careless, then the question is, well, how much money, right? Like, should the family get 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, or 100 million, or 200 million, or should the family get 100 grand? 100 grand is a lot of money, right? Isn't there a candy bar that's 100 grand? But 100 grand is a lot of money, so is 100 million. But how does the jury come up with a fair amount? Now, one of the things that I am always shocked to say is that somehow the rich people just get more money than the poor people, okay? And this is the reasoning behind the law, all right? And so let's say, that same day, let's say two people died, Katie Meyer dies, she's 22-year-old captain of the Stanford team, all that good jazz, right? And then let's just say another 22-year-old, girl, broke, her parents are whatever, they're not really in the picture. She has 2 kids, she's not working, or she works sometime, blah, 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 right? In and out of drug issues. The law says this, okay, get this. So the law says part of what they call it the damages, okay? I've said it before, right? In law, we have this thing called the remedy. The remedy is, I think I was thinking of that song, but no, the remedy is kind of like, well, what should the family get? A big factor of that is, well, how much money would the plaintiff have gotten had she lived, or how much money would the family have gotten if she lived? So a jury would say, whoa, this girl, Katie Meyer, right? She was about to go to Stanford Law School. She's a big shot. She's obviously very smart. I don't know. I think she'll average $300,000 a year, right? For the next 40 years, let's say, whatever, right? Let's see, 300,000, 40 years, that's $12 million, right? So she could, in theory, have earned $12 million. The other example I said, the girl that doesn't have a job, let's see, she averages 30 grand a year, 30 grand a year times, maybe 30 years, maybe she would have not have worked as long, 30 grand. These are actual experts that make these decisions, not Joe Samo. I'm just, summarizing it for you. She would have made 30 grand, the drug addict girl, 30 grand, 30 years, that's at best 900,000. So we went $12 million here, $900,000 there. The reasoning behind that is because the law just looks at Katie's life. I don't want to say that her life is more valuable, but damn it, her family would get a lot more money. So you put the pieces together. That is one of the shocking things about the law. That's why, that is a big element there, is like how to determine, So for example, if I'm driving and I hit a guy who's, whatever, he's just jobless and broke and has been his own life, then, and if he can't work the rest of his life, it's like, what's the big deal, dude? You just hurt someone that wasn't going to make any money anyway, right? But if I hit someone who's like a freaking doctor that's making 500 grand a year, I'm going to owe that guy a lot more money, than this guy. And that's just how the law works. So I think the damages element, if the family wins, they have to get 2 things. They have to prove liability, meaning Stanford screwed up. Then they get to the damages. I call that the bonus round. How much do we get round? Okay, I think based on how wonderful the girl was and where she was headed and how awesome, her life would have been and how much money she would have made and blah, blah, blah. And then you add the emotional damages, and she was awesome. Her parents are awesome. Like, you saw them earlier in that little clip. They're beautiful, like loving parents. I think that if Stanford is liable, I don't know. I think a jury would give the family maybe $100 million, give or take. What do you guys think? More? Go like this if it's more or less. Oh, we got a couple saying more. Mateo is saying, yeah, about that much. All right. I love it. Keep running things by me. I love hearing from you folks. Comment below. You can email me, joe@samolaw.com. There's my phone number, 619-672-1741. I love you all, and I'll see you next week.